In this lecture, we are going to discuss obligations concerning GPAI models. We will begin by looking at some obligations regardless of risk. We will then discuss the specific obligations for models with systemic risk, and we will conclude with notes on the codes of practice. So regardless of risk, GPAI model providers have a handful of obligations. Those include technical documentation, providing transparency information, for example, how to integrate models in order to create a system, complying with EU copyright law, providing a summary of training data, and appointing an EU representative for non-EU providers. I'm going to provide a little bit more information about a couple of these obligations. Concerning technical documentation, providers must provide a general description. This includes the model's intended use, an acceptable use policy, release date, its architecture, parameters, modalities, and a license. This documentation must also include information on how to integrate the model with others, the model's training methodologies and techniques. Concerning the training, validation, and testing data sets, information should include data provenance, curation methodologies, for example, cleaning and filtering, number of data points, and evaluation of the data for biases. Technical documentation must also include computational resources used for training, for example, the number of flops, and total training time. And finally, known or estimated energy consumption. So these last 2 points here, the computational resources and the known or estimated energy consumption, you'll notice that this is not required in the technical documentation for AI systems. Concerning the EU representative, there must be a written mandate, and the representative must be authorized to verify technical documentation and other requirements met, provide compliance details upon request, and cooperate with the AI office or other authorities upon request. Exceptions to the technical documentation and transparency are as follows. Those requirements do not apply to providers of open source GPAI models as long as the model is adaptable without restriction, the details concerning the parameters, weights, model architecture, and usage is publicly available, unless there is systemic risk. Concerning GPAI models with systemic risk, obligations are as follows. The model must be evaluated, for example, via adversarial testing and identifying and mitigating risk. The assessment and mitigation of possible risk must be done at the EU level. And again, here we're referring to the different registers of regulation and enforcement. So we have the EU level and then the member state or nation level. And so the assessment and mitigation of possible risks for systemic risk GPAI models must be done at the EU level. Similarly, for these models, there must be a mechanism to track, monitor, and report serious incidents. Those incidents must be reported without undue delay to the AI office and national authorities. And this reporting must include the provider's corrective measures. Finally, adequate cybersecurity, including physical infrastructure and protection, must be provided. Finally, an area that is ongoing at the time of recording concerns the codes of practice. The codes of practice are a bridge mechanism to help GPAI providers demonstrate compliance, and they are an interim measure until formal harmonized standards are developed. The AI office launched a consultation session July 30th of 2024. And here, as I'm recording at the very, very tail end of December 2024, I believe a draft has already been provided and is being shared amongst the community. In this lecture, we looked at obligations for providers of GPAI models. Regardless of risk, providers must provide technical documentation, transparency information, EU copyright law compliance, a summary of the training data, and appoint an EU representative. Technical documentation must include general description, integration information, trained methodologies, techniques, training, validation, and testing dataset information, computational resources used for training, and known or estimated energy consumption. Concerning the EU representative, there must be a written mandate whereby the representative is authorized to verify technical documentation, provide compliance details, as well as cooperate with the AI office and other authorities upon request. Exceptions to the technical documentation and transparency requirements are the GPAI model is open source, that model is adaptable without restriction, and the details of that model are publicly available, including parameters, weights, model architecture, and usage. And that exception does not apply, however, if the GPAI model has systemic risk. Obligations for models with systemic risk are performing a model evaluation, assessing and mitigating possible risk at the EU level, tracking, monitoring, and reporting serious incidents, in providing adequate cybersecurity protection to include physical infrastructure. And finally, the codes of practice are a bridge mechanism to help GPAI providers demonstrate compliance. And again, this is an interim measure until formal harmonized standards are developed.